You're live.
Great. Welcome, everybody. It's Friday, April 10th.
Yes.
Is that possible? Yes. Welcome. And we're going to begin with some sort of updates and requests as we consider our sort of general budget priorities for appropriations. And we welcome people who've been working hard on the Vermont evaluation of rural technical assistance, VRTA. And so, Gary, how I take it away? Welcome. You know all of us, right?
8 weeks.
Yeah, probably can. Okay, great.
Randy Brock, Franklin.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Now, Clarkson
Jim.
Great.
and Keisha will join us.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having us in. We really appreciate your time. For the record, my name is Gary Holloway. I'm the downtown program manager of the Department for Housing and Community Development. And I was one of the lead staff along with a couple of my colleagues on this Vermont evaluation for rural technical assistance. I'd like to
We asked for, remind me for the origin of it, but
I'm going to
right, because it's been a while.
I just wanted to acknowledge UVM and the Center for Rural Studies, as well as the Leahy Institute, which funded the initiative. Really, UVM and the Center for Rural Studies led the research efforts. So just want to really thank them for their efforts in helping us get to this point. So this was initiated out of Act 181, and the purpose of VRTA was to assess how that system can be strengthened to better deliver housing, infrastructure, climate resilience, and economic development. So early on, we put together a project steering committee of folks who participate actively in the technical assistance and resources for municipalities. So as you can see, a lot of familiar names on this. And we also advised with others that may not have been directly serving on the steering committee, but this made up the group that we met monthly to kind of guide the work that UVM was doing with their study. And a special thanks to Rebecca Sanborn Stone from the community workshop, who really helps facilitate and keep us on track.
I can't remember where you impressed you there. I was there. It was terrific.
The summit.
Yeah, the summit was outstanding.
Summit was terrific. It really, I'll bring that up in another slide and talk a little bit more about that. So the study was really, designed to listen to folks from municipalities, from regional planning commissions, from the technical assistance system, how things were working, what's working well, what's not working. We had 190 participants participate in listening sessions, in person and virtual. We had surveys. We had over 195 folks participate in online surveys. We touched on about 114 different municipalities during the research, as well as a review of 13 states. UVM had some students that really dug deep into some of the data that you can find in the longer, 100+ page report. And then we interviewed and did a little bit of a deeper dive with about 5 states, rural states across the country, kind of really understand how are they approaching this? How are they reimagining supporting communities? What's their structure? Is it at a state level? Is it at a regional level? Is it embedded at a local level? So that really helped.
County level, which of course we're in the process of, looking at.
Yeah.
The SGO stuff.
Yeah. And then, as you mentioned, we did have a really good turnout with the summit. We had 125 folks attend this in-person event, and really it was designed as a game show. Sounds a little funny, but but Rebecca was really creative in getting us to engage in a conversation, and so we broke off into different tables throughout the day, and really looked at particular issues and got creative on how we would design different approaches. And then all of that, once again, is captured in the longer report, and you can see some of the photos and some of the ideas that were baked out of that summit. So all of that information fed into the report and led to some recommendations. Some of the summaries, the recommendations, and sort of findings. Obviously, capacity is finding constrained at every level, whether it's at state, whether it's regional, at municipal level. There's a capacity issue that allows folks to consistently and accurately get to the resources that they need in an effective way. Administrative burden blocks, access to resources. Coordination failures are systemic, so we have a lot of different partners moving in different ways in this system, and sometimes the communication or the silos are such that they're not coordinated enough effectively to really provide effective services consistently. Program design matters as much as funding levels. So how are we, are we really listening to folks at the local level and designing programs that are easily accessible, that are meeting statutory requirements or federal requirements, but not making it overly burdensome.
So I'd like to put a pin in this at this moment, because actually we're experiencing this in real time right now with Act 181 response to some of the local requirements that are in Act 181. And so I would argue that we've failed to do the work that I think a lot of us thought we were going to be doing, which was engaging each town at the local level to help plan and then advance, not from the maps, but where we're going to grow, where we're not going to grow, how we're going to do it effectively. I would argue that you're identifying this is the key reason that we are where we are at the moment. That was we want. So this seems abstract, but actually at the moment we are suffering failure because of the failure of those things. I think that's a fair illustration.
I agree completely, and I guess, and I don't want to steal your thunder if you're going to lead this way, but what else keeps percolating for me in my thought you're doing this is the lack of county government. Do you see that as a role where we could have better planning and municipal assistance if we weren't leaving it to all these really small towns and villages when the counties and other states sort of provide more of that shepherding role?
I think that's the group. Out of some of the findings, that's the question at hand. We recognize there's an issue. The question is now, what is the best structure to do that? We have some things within our structure that are working really well. So we're not necessarily blowing up what we have. We have regional planning commissions that are serving their communities really well. We have, in some cases we have embedded support at the local level that works well, but oftentimes that's project specific, and then that goes away. And so are they really designing systems that are sustainable? And not just, we have the funding now, we have support, and then it goes away.
Well, we hope Roberta will be present as we go forward, Tom, with the county and regional governance task force, which kind of ground will halt with the change of leadership in GovOps. But that was supposed to be a 2-year task force to address exactly this kind of work. And, what are we losing out on by not having a more robust county governance? And anyway, keep going, because we have limited time.
Sure.
But to go to Tom's point, that is why we need to continue that governance task force, that county and regional task force.
I think the key is we need to be willing to collaborate together.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think without that, we're doing things with good intentions, but they're not always coordinated together. And that's the last point here that we're finding from other states is really that coordinated approach and willingness to play in the sandbox together, right? And not just say, I'm staying in my lane and this is what I do. But that takes time and effort. And it oftentimes takes somebody who's not running a program to actually coordinate that, right? Because we're often, I work for Department of Housing and Development, run different programs, and I'm supporting this RITA effort, but that's not my job responsibility to lead this, right? I'm doing it because out of necessity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would always wonder though, as I look at Vermont and I look at these issues of coordination, that we have so many people. We have the largest number of nonprofits, for example, at each state in the country per capita. We look at all the people who are involved in government. We look at all the people who are, like ourselves, involved in government. I think we're quite top heavy, and that perhaps is part of the problem. We had so many people having to coordinate with so many agencies, individuals on a per capita basis. And I don't know if you've ever looked at those measurements. I know I've looked at them briefly, but not in a coordinated way. Maybe we can create it.
So that's something for, I think, Common Good, who's been in here, and that's a good question for Common Good.
I don't know if I agree with top heavy, but more inefficiently fragmented. Because it's redundantly often the same.
And
Exactly.
not well coordinated. Anyway, keep going, because we're.
I'm gonna go through the next slide relatively quickly so we have time for my capital development. So these are high level, I should have done this before. You can digest this in your own time, but look at it as well. This is the shortened report that was from the steering committee, as well as the HCD staff that put into this. I'll pass these around. If you want to flip to the back page, just for the purpose of while we're discussing, there's kind of a menu of ideas that came and recommendations that came out of this report. I'm going to briefly just touch on the high 4-level buckets that we identified.
Whoever can identify this town gets a big gold star.
Yeah, you know.
Just saying.
Okay, so first off, I'm going to go through these in individual slides, but increasing state agency participation in solving local challenges, municipal and regional shared service tools, local engagement and leadership development, and increasing local capacity and flexible resources. Under each of those, you'll see some specific, kind of next step, low, medium, higher difficulty tasks. And then in the report, you'll see some more detail under those tasks in terms of how we might be able to approach that. The priority area 1, increasing state agency participation in solving local challenges, which is really kind of one of the charges of the original, Act 181 and what we were trying to look at. Municipalities face fragmented state systems and inconsistent agency involvement, while relationships are strong and coordinated. There remains informal, uneven, and difficult to sustain due to staffing constraints and frequent turnover among elected officials and volunteers. It can also result in state agencies producing resources, materials, even technical assistance programs that are too siloed or restrictive to be helpful to municipalities, especially the smaller rural ones. And then priority area 2, municipal and regional shared service tools. Many Vermont municipalities face similar challenges, but lack the tools, incentives, and governance structures needed to share services, staff, and equipment across town and regional boundaries, as well as the capacity to engage in shared services constraints. And then priority 3, local engagement and leadership development. Vermont's reliance on volunteer governance is increasingly strained with limited pipelines for new leaders and uneven access to training, education, and support for engagement. And priority area 4 is increasing local capacity and flexible resources. And problem statement is municipalities lack sufficient staff capacity, flexible funding to move projects from concept to completion, particularly in small rural communities. So I think the idea is to kind of look at these 4 priority areas. As you can see, some of the identified suggestions on where we might be able to move the dial on this. And once again, the question is probably not a one or the other, but how can we strengthen the state system, look at some regional approaches, and possibly even embed some local support to build sustainable systems at the local level, while we're also providing maybe a hub of resources at the state or regional level that can easily be accessible. Someone picks up the phone and answers a call and say, we're working on a water wastewater project. Where do I begin? And they don't have to try to figure out who to call. There's a central person, whether it's at the regional planning commission level that's doing that, and or there's a state hub office that would help serve that purpose as well.
I just wonder if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
You know this better than I, but is that further propagating the issue that we have too many distributed redundant services? Should we focus more on that centralized capacity and then not the local capacity?
I don't think it's for me in this seat to answer that question. I think that's what we need to kind of grapple with as the system exists. And that the steering committee, where I'm going to go with the next slide, and my last slide is, the steering committee has done its work in terms of getting the report together, but there's a real interest in continuing to meet to really look at the report and find ways that we can collaborate together and identify some of the low-hanging fruit that maybe isn't going to take any money or much money. Where are some areas that we can align that might take us a little bit more time with some money, and then where are some areas that are going to take years to do, and let's coordinate together an approach that can work.
So where do you need, you don't actually have a specific budget request.
No, this is at the beginning of the governor's budget.
This is in the governor's.
It is not in the governor's budget.
And so what do you need to keep going? Because I don't know where you've embedded, and if it's in a bill at the moment that's in active play. Are you in the House committee? Are you in the House budget 951?
I'll let the Council of Development speak to
Okay,
that.
right.
But, there is a recommendation out of the House at $250,000.
Okay, because we're in the process of deciding what in the House budget we prioritize.
Yeah.
So 250 and who did it go to? DHCD?
Um,
To your
I
office?
believe it's called out to go to ACCD. Yeah, yeah. So fortunately, we do have some money left over in the grant that allows us to continue to pay a community workshop, Rebecca Sanborn Stone, to facilitate the discussion, keep this group moving together. Unfortunately, that time is limited. Really, we have just a few more months with her. And so it's gonna be upon us and our willingness at this point, without additional resources, to continue
Right.
the conversations and where can we work on templates together? Can we, we're already doing some of this work through the Vermont Council on Development, that does community visits.
Right.
So is there a way that we can strengthen and support that process better?
And work maybe with the governance committee, the task force, which is on track
Correct.
to reignite. And it would be great if you engage with that, because that'd be key. So given our time, I'm going to turn, who would like to go next? Jessica or Denise?
I'm gonna go next. I'm gonna bring Jess with me though.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Gary, anything else before
No, I just,
that was great to
you know,
teal.
I'll extend by saying, this is a team sport, and I think
Yeah.
we need the
Oh.
legislature, we need the administration, we need the PA system, all working collaboratively together to solve this issue. It's
And
not-
it remind me in 181, what was the allocation, what was the appropriation for this?
I want to say, don't quote me on this, but I want to say it was somewhere around 600,000.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
We put a lot.
I can't remember in the top of my head.
So I just want everyone to
Yeah.
appreciate that we invested a lot.
Put the money in.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
And Jessica. Well,
Yeah, we're both gonna come up.
great.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Good to have you. And you heard us introduce ourselves,
Yep,
because I don't think either of you've been in front of this committee before this year.
That's for sure.
Great. Welcome.
So I'll go first. For the record, my name is Denise Smith and I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Council on Rural Development. And I'm Jessica Savage. I'm the Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives at the Vermont Council on Rural Development. And I just want to name Jessica was responsible for implementing the MTAP program at the Vermont Council on Rural Development. We were one of the.
We love
recipients of
MTAP.
that. I know.
There's another, all these assistance programs need to be coordinated also.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I mean, the thing about MTAP is that funding has ended for most
Yes.
people if it wasn't funded last year.
Right.
So,
We are asking for funding for this year. We'll see what happens.
okay. So thank you for your time and opportunity to present the collective work that we've been doing to support the investment in rural Vermont towns. Now more than ever, it's critical that we and others can provide comprehensive supports to communities who are navigating incredibly complex issues, as you noted, Chair, with the Act 181 rollout and how communities are feeling left out of that process. VCRD, so who we are, we call ourselves VCRD, and I know it's an acronym, and there's a lot of acronyms in Vermont, but for the Vermont Council on Rural Development, we are your state rural development council. We were formed in the Farm Bill in the early 90s, but we are an independent, neutral, non-partisan nonprofit now. So originally we were part of the state government, and then over the years with less funding through the federal government. So we, our forefathers saw a need.
Let's just
it was
Paul.
it
Let's
was
just put it on Paul.
it was
Paul
before
Costello.
Paul. It was Vaughn, I think, was the
Or was it?
original executive director, and then Paul came in soon after.
Paul-
He was there for for a long time.
Right.
So Paul Costello was the executive director, and the work that we've done and have curated over the years, 30 years, we've done over 100 communities now. We've done.
I bet we all represent communities that have gone through this process.
Yeah.
And I think every one of us has participated in this process yet.
Maybe.
Oh, really? Gosh, I've
You've done
participated. So we
Uh,
now need you to come back and do an update, which is the problem is once each community sets its priorities, then you need to see 20 years later, well, how are you doing?
Yeah, we're actually, so that's an aside, but we are doing.
But we should work on that. I'd be happy to help you on
We should,
that.
oh, good, that's great to hear. So we also convene, the other thing that we do is we convene statewide policy initiatives. So the broadband initiative, creative economy, those are all statewide policy initiatives that stemmed out of VCRD that were statewide with a council that pulled those together. And the other thing that we do that is sort of silent, I guess, not silent, but when we go to a community, we bring resources with us. So as Gary was alluding to, we already are providing early coordinated services around technical assistance for towns. And then we do a lot of leadership follow-up with the communities after they've started their action teams. And that work is a little bit less visible for people, but it's something that we do a lot. And the MTAP funding really helped to support that work in our organization. We were also, both of us served on the steering committee. I was new, so learning a lot, but we both served on the steering committee for the VERDA report and helped to inform a lot of that process. And the findings from that report, what Gary just presented, really resonate with what we've seen in small towns that we work with across the state. And they need us, right? They need Vermont's technical assistance provider network is what we're calling it, ecosystem, whatever word you want to use, to work well together, to talk to each other and have the time, staff, and financial resources to do that. And MTAP was the beginning of that for us, for that happening. Not that it wasn't happening, but it was happening in a much more intentional way with people that had capacity to do.
Just remind everybody, MTAP, Municipal Technical Assistance
Program, and it came out of AOA, Agency of Administration, and Jess can talk more about that. But it was really, really valuable. Anyways, we are here. So the VERDA report came out in November. There was nothing put in the governor's budget. And so VCRG
to continue.
Yeah, to continue the work. Exactly. Last year, there was money in the budget and it was removed.
And so
at the end of the session,
which committee in the House embedded you in the budget or advocated for you in the budget?
We had GovOps and Economic Development.
Right.
Both put us in their budget letters.
Yeah.
And we were putting about 500,000 both of those make appropriations, but it's 250 for this year's request.
So 250 is what made it through.
That's what made it through. Yeah. Yes. So I do have a handout that kind of outlines what we're requesting and why we're requesting it and what it would do. But I'll just read what we've written here so I don't forget. We're here to ask you for $500,000 in the FY27 budget to make good on what rural towns have told us they need. When you go out and ask people for opinions and information and then don't do anything about it, that's also not a good look. But our proposal is simple and allows for the implementation of some of the most impactful recommendations of the VERDA report. It would, one, provide some backbone coordination support to implement TA funding programs that directly benefits our underserved rural towns and villages. It would provide some resource assistance to some of our staff, consultant time to provide custom resource teams for each community selected for this program. And then the most of the funding that we're asking for would go directly to towns and small grants.
So help me understand, because is this in addition to the 250 VERDA itself needs, or is this VCRD's request?
This is, so VERDA does not have a request right now because there is no request.
So what's in the budget, VERDA or VCRD?
VCRD. Going through ACCD. Yes, the money would go through ACCD
for
VCRD.
the VERDA to continue the VERDA.
Yes.
Okay, that helps.
Continue the work that's happened through the VERDA process or the MTAP process. Jess, I'm getting that right, correct?
No, yeah.
Okay. Yep. So it sounds ambitious because we're only asking for 1 year funding right now. But the thing is, it's a continuation of something that's already started, right? So it's like bridge funding. It's not like, because what's going to happen this year is this money's going to go away. And then all of these people that have been working together, coordinating, talking to one another, that's all going to end. Because no more resources to do the work. So this is a bridge to get us through this year to really come back. And if there is this, regional governments, whatever is happening, but for us to continue all of these regional technical assistance providers to stay engaged in this collaboration, which is what rural Vermonters are asking for. Because they're confused, like you're saying, there's a lot of things out there. So how do you navigate a system that doesn't feel like a system?
Well, yes. That's and Jessica, you got 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Anything to add? Yeah.
No, I just want to maybe emphasize a question that you brought up earlier. I can't remember who asked about sort of local capacity. I think maybe it was you.
We're all concerned.
We're all concerned with it. And I think, what's the question that I always ask myself as we do this work in a bunch of different ways is, you know, what do towns need as a long run, right? What are those abiding capacity constraints that they're experiencing? And they can tell us, right? And it's different in every town, I would say. If you think of the town's capacity in your districts, right, they're going to have a different answer to that. One town might need, well, if we just had a part-time town administrator, that might do it for them. That's the abiding capacity they might need. Others might need something more significant. And I'm bringing that up because this whole funding ask is really about listening to towns, and they told us they need us, these TA providers, to really be responsive, customized, navigable, easily accessible, and the funding that they have to do their project work to also be flexible and easily accessible. And so the concept here is to take what we all worked on through MTAP, which was a great pilot program, and make sure that we take those lessons learned and all these findings in the Verda report and really make good on what towns are asking for. And there's a lot of demand out there, so.
It's huge, and
Yeah.
we see it, and that's why we established the Municipal Resilience Fund.
Yeah.
SGO 2 years ago, and we just need to keep having that, because there needs to be an accessible place for them to access to ask for money. Randy, did you have a question? No.
Great. Well, thank you for listening. And
Yeah.
let us know if you need anything from us or
Yeah,
we're in the building quite a bit right now. So
yes, yes, we've noticed. And we appreciate this and appreciate this aspect. SGO, you did a good presentation with SGO, and so that will supported that. Yes.
So that's, I'm not sitting here silently. This is incredibly important. It's the highest priority for me. I think that's what we were materializing around yesterday when we were going through the budget. So I definitely, as well, the rural parts of Vermont need the attention and the resources to help themselves grow and apply with all the rules that we keep coming up with here in the Montpelier. So,
Yeah, it's a big thing.
top priority.
This is when all the things are broken and towns need to recover and towns need to grow. And I mean, this goes from helping towns with CHIP to helping recover from disasters. It's like the whole, how do we coordinate response on a whole range of issues?
yeah. And going back to your question about, the follow-up, we're doing the storytelling project right now. So we're reaching out to communities that we work with. And I just have to say, it's just awe-inspiring, the resilience and kind of this hope that small towns have and how much they love their communities is, right? But you live there, we all live there, so it just feels.
So
really-
I think one of the things that would help us who look at data, I would be very interested for you to be tracking the towns you have done these town visits with and how they're succeeding.
Yeah.
And how are they doing? How are they doing as a result of your work and your helping them prioritize and plan for the future? And are they doing better than the towns that didn't have? Because this was an initial municipal support. Your work. And are they doing better than towns that have not yet benefited from one of your site visits and your work helping them prioritize their future?
Yeah.
What they're doing in the future, planning into the future.
That's a harder one, like the control towns might be a little.
But that
difficult for us,
helps you
but that does
fundraise.
help us.
I mean,
Yeah,
that helps you do your work.
Yeah.
And I think it's something all of us are looking for is, oh, no, it's already great, but what impact, right? Is your help with towns, is that impacting their success into the future? David?
Is it possible to give us real examples in towns or in our districts that I can go to and say, these guys are asking for funding. What do you think? What was your relationship? What was the benefit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They could do that
That's
now.
very impoverished.
Send that to you this afternoon.
But also, if you'd be kind enough to get in each one of our districts, which towns you've done site visits with, so that we know, and we can also work to build on that. That would be great.
Yeah, and I just want to say one thing. We're saying us, like VCRD, this funding request is very minorly going to affect our budget. Like it's really
We
about
appreciate it.
funding
On page 2
system
are
and-
all your partners.
Yeah, it's really about the system and
Yes, listen.
and 100%, we can give a lot of examples of, MTAP allowed us to work with about 3 times the amount of towns around the state that we have been able to.
Yeah.
Be able to say yes to people looking for support for something that's really impactful for them is, you know, that's what
Right.
you want to be able to do. So, you know, we were just in Putney last month doing a celebration event after
Yeah.
3 years of being there. And that MTAP funding helped to fund that possibility where they were looking for more volunteers and recruiting people and also giving everybody in the community an update on the work that they've been doing there. So, yeah.
So we need to shift to NOFA
Yeah.
because we
Thank
have
you
a hard
so
stop
much.
in 15 minutes. We're gonna shift over to some big issues that we have, and then we have to do our work of
Well, thank you.
doing this priority.
Having
Thank
us.
you guys.
Appreciate
Really
it.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here
Yeah,
and for all your work.
well, we're getting there.
And
And,
Senator Brock, we're having a downtown historic preservation conference in St. Albans, June 4th.
oh,
So
great.
I know that's your district, so it's for everybody, but plant that seed, you should mark the calendars on. Yeah. Have a great week and all.
Terrific. Thank you, Gary. Yeah. Okay, Maddie.
Oh, not Maddie. Jess, Ray Jess. Yeah.
Oh, Jess, hi, we have
Yeah.
Maddie coming her down as, witness
She would update it.
that NOFA.
And how should I load up slides? Yeah, so.
And we have them in front of us, I think.
Link. It's okay if you like send it to me again really
in my
quickly.
email.
Yep, and then, yeah, you just join, I'll join you, and then see it there, and then you just have to hit the share button at the bottom of your screen, and it will show your screen and the slides about. Alright, it's one of your. Let's show, right? Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Sheriff Clarkson, and all of you all for having us in today. My name is Jess Hayes Lucas. I'm with NOFA Vermont. My colleague Joanna Doran is going to be joining us in just a minute and is ready to go regarding NOFA Vermont's request for the 2027 state budget. I'm the grassroots policy organizer for NOFA, which is the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Vermont. I want to thank you all for your votes in support of Senate 60, which is now Act 78, the Farm and Forestry Operations Security Special Fund. And we're asking to please include an appropriation of $15.6 million in the 2027 budget memo to support the fund's implementation. I will also say that the Senate Committee on Agriculture is including a $1 million appropriation in their recommendations for the 2027.
And so why, I'm just curious why, I mean, yes, farming is economic development. Why are you here? Because, I mean, we have a much bigger jurisdiction than ag.
Yes.
Great that ag is supporting you. That's the appropriate place for this.
Yes.
You have a lot, you're more
Yeah.
competing for your attention in this committee than you do in ag.
Okay,
Just saying.
let's get right to that.
Right.
Would it be helpful if I went through some of the slides that demonstrated
Sure.
the impact
Absolutely. I'm
on
just giving
weather
you,
and climate?
you have a, if you've already been included in ag's priority letter, you don't need to duplicate efforts. It's, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
We're hopeful that duplicating efforts helps to get us in the appropriation thing. But so while you all can decide, I know that you all have a lot of really tough choices to make. So I want to present you with some information to help you make those choices, and you'll make.
Yeah.
So these are some of the impacts on how extreme weather have impacted working lands from 2023 to 2025. I'm going to go through just where we're getting that a little bit. This is the impact on 2023, which was the biggest hit from the floods, of course. We're getting this data from VGAP applications and also from surveys to loggers and farmers over the last 3 years.
Right.
It's a snapshot. They're indicators. We know that this is not the comprehensive impact that we're seeing on extreme weather from working lands, but it's what we've been able to gather with the data that we have. One of the advantages of the Farm and Forestry Operations Security Special Fund would be that if it's implemented, then we're able to better track these impacts and how they're impacting our working lands businesses. So the 15.6 million comes from the average of the last 3 years of documented loss. It's exactly half of that because the bill would cover 50% of documented and covered losses. So I'll leave that there for a minute and go to what I hope speaks a little bit more clearly to your question, although I don't think it's a complete response to your question. Right. But this is just from data from Farm to Plate. So this is some of our reasoning about how our working lands are economic drivers for Vermont. This data is only about the farms, so it leaves out logging. It doesn't speak to logging, and it only talks about the economic output in the farm to food system alone. So it doesn't account for things like veterinary services, machinery repair services, tractor sales, farm equipment sales and servicing. It doesn't include that whole world, but it is a really integrated part, especially of our rural economies, which is why we were really thankful to be able to present this information to your committee today. So as you can see here, we have, let me have a slide. I have notes on this one that I want to make sure so I don't make it up. Okay, so this is in 2022, the sale of Vermont farm products was running just over $1 billion. $1 billion in farm gate sales was the foundation for $11.5 billion in total economic output when accounting for food system-wide activity and that activity alone, not including those other things. So ensuring that our farms can rebound when extreme weather hits is one thing that we can do to protect not only the heart and soul of Vermont, but also our foundational and really pivotal working lands economies, especially in rural areas of the state. And it's part of the reason that so many young people are inspired to stay here and move here and be a part of the life and culture in Vermont. So we feel like it's worth protecting and growing.
Just curious.
Yeah.
The graph on the left side, that bump from 2017 onward, is that the cannabis bump?
I would not think so
Outlet
because this is farm to plate, and so
Okay.
cannabis
Farm
would,
to Plate is more impactful because cannabis didn't hit till 2020.
Oh, 20.
yeah. So I don't think that that's the cannabis one. If I'm wrong, I'll check. If I'm wrong,
It can't be because we didn't do it until.
Yeah, but
well, there
it's
you go.
it's the difference between 2017 and 20.
Oh, right, yeah.
So
I
it's
just-
whatever happened.
Yeah.
There's not a lot happening in outside the cultural sector that's earth shaping.
That's a major addition. And I think it's our specialty foods. I mean, as farms diversify, that has also been a huge bump. I mean, where we are in the cheese world and the wine world and
That would definitely be my sense of it. And then just regionally, the 30% of local food and for all of New England initiative by 2030, like that, I think there's just been a lot of regional attention too. And Vermont has a very deep role in that.
Yeah.
So,
Like,
but I'll see. Okay. So the other point that I would like to make, and before I close it up and hand it over to Joanna, is just that farmers are always responding to their environment. This is not just a run-of-the-mill bad weather event sort of situation. These are for events that are beyond any one farmer's control. As I've been talking with farmers across the state to make sure that this fund would be useful to them and how they would like to see it implemented. I have been really stunned to learn about the things that they do daily on the regular, just as part of their routine to account for weather and even extreme weather and be nimble and be flexible. So we're just hopeful that Vermont can do the same for them, given their role in our state economy. And I will hand it over to Joanne. Oh, I'm sorry. I should.
No, that's great. Joanna online.
I believe it's yes.
No, you can stay right there. And
Just join also to be using.
Hi, yes, I am here. Thank
Susan.
you, Chair Clarkson and committee for having us today and for accommodating me online. I am Joanna Doran, the Local Food Access Director with NOFA Vermont. And I am here to just touch on quickly our request for $500,000 in the FY27 budget for our food security programs, Crop Cash Plus, and Farm Share. And I know that you heard from Carrie Staler yesterday about multiple requests in the Food Security Coalition priorities for this session. This is one of them, and I know that you are a little bit familiar, so I'll just give a brief overview of these programs and why we're requesting your support in this committee. So Crop Cash doubles SNAP dollars at farmers markets to be used on purchases for fresh fruits and vegetables. Crop Cash, I should say, is a in part federally funded program that does require a local match to draw down those federal funds. So we do need state funding to continue drawing in those federal funds. It's basically a one-to-one match. Crop Cash Plus is funded entirely through the state, and it expands the Crop Cash program to any SNAP eligible food. So this benefits low income shoppers so that they can buy the full span of groceries at a farmer's market. And it also supports hundreds more producers at farmers markets so that they can receive these coupons as income at the farmer's market. And then finally, Farm Share is a CSA or community supported agriculture program that supports low income Vermonters in affording local food for the duration of the season. So these programs are incredibly impactful for revenue for our Vermont producers. This graph sort of shows the impact of how when we, as NOFA, are providing funding for these programs, they bring in additional revenue. So the blue bar is all of the fundraising and including the state funding that we have received for these programs. The green is showing additional spending that comes as sort of collateral when folks are using these programs. So when someone goes to a farmer's market because they know that they can get additional dollars through the Crop Cash and Crop Cash Plus program, they will be more likely to spend their SNAP dollars at the farmer's market and shop there at all. It might not be accessible to them otherwise. Also included in that green bar is through our CSA program, the Farm Share program. When we pitch in money through NOFA, we are also leveraging community support from folks in the CSA community that are wanting to support their neighbor in buying a CSA share. So it's a cost sharing program. When the state invests in these programs, it leverages about twice as much overall going directly to our local producers. I know we're short on time, so I'll skip over this slide. It's just showing the interaction between NOFA's food security programs and the Food Banks Vermonters Feeding Vermonters. But all of these programs work together to ensure that Vermonters can get the food that they need while directly supporting our producers. So please support the request for $500,000 for these programs in the FY27 budget. And I'll stop there if there's any questions.
Well, I think our first question is, did Senate Ag, I know they included what did Senate Ag include in their priority request?
Great question. Senate Ag did include the full $500,000 in their priority request, and the House did as well.
Yeah, and what came through the budget? What made it through in 951 or whatever it is?
In the House version of the budget, the full 500,000 did as well.
Okay, great. So I know it's in Ag's request. I know it's also in Senate GovOps request.
Yes.
So you were well supported. You have some big fans of Crop Cash and Crop Cash Plus.
It's a
So-
tongue twister. Yeah, and we
Yeah,
are so appreciative of that support, and we, like Jess said, we just want to make sure that this committee sees the economic impact of these programs as well.
yeah. No, and we appreciate them, and we appreciate this is just the integration of our economy it's just that we're so dependent on our food systems. I mean, this goes right to also why we want to reestablish a culinary institute.
Yep.
So that all that our specialty foods and all our fabulous food we produce, it has the avenue for being created, great things created up from it. The one thing I'm missing is your support for the Working Lands grants. I assume you're supportive of those. Yeah.
Yes, we are part of that group too.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. This is very helpful. And we really appreciate David.
Just one quick question on your 15.6 million for the farm and forestry operation, this is security special fund. I'm just curious, rationalization for the fund in relationship to business owners' insurance obligations versus the state's responsibility to provide a recovery fund. How does that balance out?
So there are a lot of crop insurance programs nationally. So that there's a couple of ways to answer your question, and I'll try to be very, very brief because I know we're short on time. A lot of the national crop insurance programs
We're over time.
for Vermont. I'm sorry.
No, let me finish the question, but then we're gonna move on.
Don't work well for Vermont farmers because the crop insurance works like you have to do the premium per crop. A lot of Vermont's farms are very diversified. So that it doesn't make economic sense for farmers to get crop insurance in the way that it's structured now. And that's really something that we're working on federal level with the Farm Bill.
Right. And that's hopefully being restructured so that it works for farmers, because who the hell is it supposed to work for if it isn't working with that?
Yeah, and it works for farmers out in the Midwest. It doesn't work for Vermont farmers. So while we're waiting on that not waiting on it, we're working on that as well, very aggressively on the federal level. But we think that we have an opportunity in Vermont to be more nimble, to be faster, to really address the need that has existed for the last 3 years and will continue to exist. So this will cover uncovered losses if farmers do have insurance and are able to take advantage of their programs, and they would not be eligible for this. This is only for otherwise uncovered losses.
Right.
And just a very quick question.
Yeah.
Is your accent Virginia?
It's Kentucky.
Well, good to have you here.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for your time today.
Oh,
and for leading.
we
into this.
appreciate it.
We really appreciate it.
Listen, we look at all things that impact our economy, and we have explored transportation impacts, and we certainly explore impacts in
Thank
all
you.
sorts of ways.
We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Joanna. Good to have you both. And now we're going to
Thank you.
pivot to housing. Friday is housing day, except when it's also appropriations deadline day. And so we are going to, so I don't quite know when we're going to just return to our larger house budget priority setting. And I'd like to have us end at like 11:15 on the our landlord tenant stuff, and figure out when we might, if we could go into a little bit into the lunch hour to do that. Oh, right, they need to come back. Let's just figure that out, because we need some further time to do that. So we're going to end landlord tenant about 11:10, 11:15, wherever we naturally find a good ending point. And we're going to start with Cam, our legislative counsel, to tee us up on today's conversation. Right? Isn't that what you wanted?
Yes,
Right.
ma'am, I do. I
Right.
have just 5 minutes to correct it.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. I just wanted to take a few minutes. We've done a walkthrough of the bill, but I wanted to take a few minutes to answer a question that came up last time I was here. And then I also need to correct or clarify 2 pieces of information. So I'll start with the quick answer. There was a question about whether or not a landlord can charge a different security deposit to different individuals based on risk factors. And as I had mentioned in my testimony, and I've kind of thought about it further, There's nothing that I'm aware of in federal or state law that would just outright prohibit a landlord from doing that. If they are being based on some sort of objective factor that isn't discriminating against an individual based on some sort of protected characteristic, I think the landlord would potentially be trading into some risky grounds by doing that, because they're kind of opening themselves up by treating certain individuals differently. They're potentially opening themselves up to an argument that they're discriminating against a certain, type of individual or somebody based on a protected characteristic. Keeping in mind that a landlord cannot discriminate against someone in houses because that person is the recipient of some sort of government assistance. So if you're having a threshold whereby, certain individuals that may be of lower income that could be receiving government assistance, and the landlord is charging them a higher security deposit because of perceived risk, there could be an argument there. So I'm simply wanting to make sure you're all aware, as long as it was entirely objective, an individual within this credit range gets this
Right,
security
exactly.
deposit, an individual within this credit range may get a lower security deposit. There's nothing that I'm aware of that would prohibit that.
As long as it's based on an objective.
Right.
Measurement.
And as you all know with these things, it's going to then depend on what are the facts on the ground, what's actually occurring. And so, but just as an objective matter, there's nothing in the law that's going to prohibit someone at this point from doing it.
Thomas, did you have a thought?
So for the advocates, I'll be curious if in practice that actually is happening. And then the thing I was going to ask about credit ratings, if that's objectionable or think that it is non-discriminatory. Similarly, references. So if somebody can't provide references for previous places they rented with landlords that would vouch for them as good tenants, would you expect that to cross any lines as a discriminator for a larger?
I don't think so, but when you get into conversations about discrimination, you can have multiple different arguments that are made whereby, a practice, an individual, a practice that a landlord puts into place may not on its face be discrimination against an individual, but it may have a discriminatory impact against a certain subset of individuals. And so that's where as you all know, we have to be careful and condition our comments here of saying it's going to depend on what the facts are on the ground and how is it actually being implemented. And so, it's but just as the highest general matter, there's nothing that is illegal about it.
It sounds like it needs to have an objective measure or an objective and is consistently applied.
Right.
Right.
But then keep in mind your bill, the proposal, at least in front of you, would limit the security deposit to 2 months rent at this point. So a landlord wouldn't be able to go above that if this were to go into effect.
So that's one of the pluses.
Right. Okay. So
What's the
that was
other
the
one?
answer. That was the answer to the question.
Right.
Second thing, I need to pass out a new one of these.
Oh,
My
good.
apologies for this, but I noticed this week that
Okay.
one of the cross references here was in the incorrect line.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
I'm wanting to make sure that you have the corrected version of this. If the issue is you have written rental agreements or no written rental agreements, and there's a question of what's the termination notice period for those. And as I've discussed in the past, it depends on whether it's in writing or not. And then it depends on how long has the individual been there. Have they been there for 2 years or less, or have they been there for more than 2 years? And I realized that there was just an incorrect line on it. So
Can I ask a question? I just want to make sure I understand. Right now, a landlord could charge higher, they could ask for more money than first and last month's rent. Like a security deposit law is pretty strict. But right now they could ask for anything on top of that.
right. So it's not
No.
strict in the sense in Vermont, there's no cap. So a landlord, at least at the
Okay.
state level,
Yeah,
a landlord could say, you need to give me 6 months security deposit. because there's no statutory
Right, this said,
limitation on what a landlord can charge.
Mhm.
There are some municipalities that have
Okay,
enacted ordinances
okay,
that currently limit caps. And if
Right,
you
right.
remember, I made a comment that discussion came up on the House floor.
Mhm.
So if you move forward with 772 of having the 2-month cap in the statute, you may also want to add some tweaks to that section to clarify that a municipality can have a lower
Still do
cap,
have a-
right? Then there
Mhm.
wouldn't be any conflict
Right.
there. So there are municipalities that have put in place
Yeah.
ordinances with the security deposit cap. There's no cap in the state level.
Right. I'll just say this, my sense, and maybe some of the experts around the room can weigh in when they speak. The better practice to not, I mean, we're seeing articles right around the country of you have to have 3 times the amount of money in the bank as the rent being charged to sort of be considered a worthy tenant. And that is right. It's giving landlords the way to say, this is our objective measure, is having a very high income, frankly, an income that most people don't have, to then make it through our screening process to be eligible for this apartment. My sense, and I'd love for experts to weigh in, the better practice to not price people out of the market before they even get a chance to walk in the door, is to have a cosigner. So to basically, on the one hand, you're saying, okay, you don't have great credit. I'm not going to say no, but I'm also not going to say you have to fabricate $150,000 of income out of nowhere. They'd say, I need someone else in your life to vouch for you. That's what banks do. You have a cosigner. So while people still may bristle at the notion of a cosigner because their bad credit comes from medical debt, et cetera, someone may have medical debt, and then you're saying you have to have 2 months rent and a security deposit to overcome that. I personally don't want to send the wrong signal to landlords that we're telling them that's a more accepted practice than finding a cosigner.
so that is an option. I put it down as a note, but it's something for us to explore. Anything else before we move to our witness?
So one other quick thing I wanted to just kind of clarify, that came up in our conversation about, are there any notice period obligations on a tenant? So
Right.
we've talked frequently about the notice period in 4467, where the landlord is going to terminate a rental agreement and for what purposes, how much notice does the landlord have to give? And I feel like what I said last time was there wasn't a notice period for a tenant. And
Yeah.
what I was thinking about was more in the context of the end of a lease agreement. So when the lease agreement kind of is set to expire, there is a section, it's under the tenant's obligations. And within that section, it does require that if a tenant is going to, terminate a rental agreement, then they have to provide at least, 1 rental period's notice, so a month's notice, essentially, unless the agreement states otherwise. So if you have a written agreement, your written agreement could say you need to provide the landlord 2 months' notice. The tenant should follow what is in the written agreement, because if they don't provide that notice, then the tenant could argue that they've abandoned the unit, in which case there's a statutory section that says that the tenant has an obligation to continue to pay rent during the life of the rental agreement, unless the landlord is able to find someone else to take over. So separate from that, we talked a little bit about, practically what happens on the ground if a tenant isn't complying with their, termination notice period that they've agreed to with the landlord. It may result in a bad reference. We talked about that. But just when the lease, the lease term is set to expire, you have a 12-month lease term. Current law requires the landlord to provide a notice period if they're not going to continue to rent to that tenant at the expiration of that written term. It's one of the lines here on the sheet that I gave you. Is the tenant obligated to comply with a similar notice period? It's probably in their best interest to do so, again, for the reference points that we were making. But what are the legal consequences if they don't? If a tenant just moves out the day before their 12-month written lease expires, and then goes to the landlord the next day and says, I'm ready for my security deposit back, is the landlord going to be able to legally hold them accountable to anything? Not that I read in the statute. So just wanted to kind of clarify that one point that I was making the other day. I don't want it to be understood that the tenants aren't required to comply with any notice periods at all. If they don't provide a notice of terminating an agreement when it's in effect, by giving at least a month's notice or giving longer if their agreement requires, they could be held accountable to paying rent for that next month or for the remainder of the written rental agreement if they've abandoned the
And they
property.
risk reference issues too.
Yes.
Yeah, Thomas.
So that all makes logical sense. That's why you take first and last month rent. So you give notice so that you get back that amount. Right. If you don't give notice, you just leave. And I believe the landlord just gets to keep that rent that you paid by paying at the start of the period. I think I heard you say that our current statutes, the state that you have, that tenants are obligated to give a month of rental terms notice, but it's deferential to any other contract agreement. So our state law currently has that default where one rental term, which is usually a month, is that correct? So if you're on a month, it would
In
apply.
this section, right, it says in this section 4456, it says, and this is where it has other tenant obligations. The tenant cannot create non-compliance within the dwelling units. The tenant has to conduct themselves and require other individuals to conduct themselves in a manner that will not disrupt other tenants' peaceful enjoyment of their property. So these are obligations of the tenant.
In statute.
This is in statute, yes, sir. And then there's a section that says, unless it's inconsistent with the rental agreement or otherwise provided by law, a tenant may terminate a tenancy by actual notice given to the landlord at least one rental payment period prior to the termination date specified in the notice. So that's saying that you need to give one rental period's notice. And there's a question though about, okay, well, under what circumstances are we talking about? Are we talking about in the middle of a written rental agreement? Are we talking about at the end of a written rental agreement? Or are we talking about in a, kind of month to month rental agreement? So I think your takeaway, I think, should be, yes, a tenant has obligations to provide notice. They should provide under the statute at least one rental period's notice. Usually that's going to be a month, unless the written rental agreement says otherwise, then they should follow their written rental agreement. That's kind of how I would leave it at you as what the statutory obligations are.
I'm gonna move us into our witnesses because we have an incredible
Limited amount of time
lineup.
and a lot of individuals.
I just want to flag one thing that I think everyone should be familiar with, because you started to touch on any tenant's right to enjoy their premises free from harassment, et cetera. Every tenant also enjoys that right vis-a-vis their landlord. So a landlord can end up being charged with harassment of a tenant if they're looking in their windows and sort of standing in the hallway, like waiting to get them for something. That's also not considered quasi-criminal in the
And the last thing I'm just saying that one thing that is in 772, it added into the section that prohibits retaliation of the landlord against the tenant for the tenant, taking certain actions, notifying a government agency that there's a habitability issue, for example, that's in the current statute. The landlord can't retaliate against an individual for that. One thing that the House added in was a line that says that the landlord can't retaliate against a tenant for taking any legal action against a landlord that's law. So if they feel they're being harassed by a landlord, Senator, is kind of the circumstances you were identifying, and they were to take some sort of legal action to, limit or further prohibit that harassment, then the landlord couldn't retaliate against the individual.
Right.
Okay.
More to follow. Not or not that further conversation, and the bill is coming to us as soon as they're done, and they should be done hopefully next week or so, because they're only addressing their areas. Okay, we have an incredible group of advocates, pro and con this bill, and some of whom have worked with us as we fashioned the bill. And I'd love to begin with Jessica Hyman. It is good to have you. We have you online. Welcome. If you would be kind enough to introduce yourself and
Can I just ask a question? Because I feel like it should help me understand the scope of our work
Yeah.
as we might get this bill. What do you consider our section as opposed to judiciary?
I think the whole bill is ours, but judiciary has weighed in as they did in the House with the ejectment sections. So those are I believe Cameron.
So
those are the
no
sections.
trespass orders, the length of time in court.
I walked through the ejectment sections, so the sections related to Title 12, related to court procedure and ejectment, and then we also talked about trespass as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
And
because
there's-
trespass has a lot to do with whether or not a sheriff or police officer will enforce a no trespass.
Yeah.
And the trespass is a criminal trespass, so it is a criminal matter, so
Yeah.
yes, ma'am, we talked about that and Senate Judiciary.
So we're gonna be talking less about no trespass and the length of time in court.
Right, that is pretty much mostly, hopefully. I mean, that was pretty settled in the House, but the Senate is reviewing it. Jess, let's do Jess full screen again, and let's go for it.
Good. Thank you so much, Chair Clarkson, and to the rest of the committee for having me here. Again, it's nice to see you. I also wanted to thank Cameron for the fair housing related clarifications at the beginning of this. I agree with everything he says, and also would like to add that in terms of the security deposit provisions, they would need to be applied, they would need to be objective and also applied equally for all tenants under certain criteria. So thank you for bringing that up.
So objective and consistent.
Good. And so for the record, I'm Jess Hyman. I'm the Associate Director of CVOEO's statewide housing advocacy programs, including our Fair Housing Program. And as you all know, CVOEO is one of the state's 5 community action agencies, and we work to advance economic, social, environmental, and racial justice, and we support people in achieving economic independence. While most of our programs are in the Champlain Valley region, our housing programs are statewide, and we support renters, people living in manufactured home communities, and individuals experiencing discrimination in their housing. Through our statewide education and support program, we respond to more than 3,000 calls and emails each year through our helplines for renters and manufactured home residents. We provide rights and responsibilities education for renters, for landlords, for municipal officials, and also service providers. We offer housing stability and eviction prevention support. We deliver services to and support organizations that work with asylum seekers, and then we also administer a temporary housing voucher for families exiting homelessness. So I'm here today to make 2 critical funding requests, to share our deep concerns about H772, and to talk a little bit about why early education and intervention matter for renters and for landlords, and why things like that can help address some of the problems that H772 was intended to address. So first off, we respectfully urge the committee to restore the $200,000 in housing education appropriations that were originally part of 772, but were removed as it moved through the House. So this funding is really essential to sustaining fair housing education and also support for both renters and landlords. These educational offerings, which include workshops like tenant skills, finding housing, and sustaining the rent, all part of our preferred renter certificate program. They're offered in various formats and languages, and together with one-on-one coaching, they help prevent conflict, reduce evictions, and promote housing stability by making sure that that tenants understand what their responsibilities are and their rights, and also that landlords understand what their rights and responsibilities are. These are proven methods to help stop problems before they start.
Yeah.
We'd also
an ounce of prevention.
Go ahead.
No, $200,000 worth of prevention. I agree.
Exactly, and especially in light of limitations that we spoke about last week during the Fair Housing Month testimony about limitations on what we can do with funds provided by HUD and how that limits how we can teach and educate the public about Vermont protections, this funding would be especially timely. We also urge you to support the $600,000 in landlord liaison appropriation included in the House General Bill. Yeah, so the landlord liaisons are these really important positions that it's a proven strategy that can help build strong and trusted networks of landlords, providing education and technical assistance and also problem-solving support, helping.
Are they, Jess, are they what we considered housing navigators earlier on?
Yeah, no, this is a different position. So the landlord liaisons were created with one-time pandemic funding, and so all the community action agencies at one point had these positions. And right now, I think there's only one position existing in the state at Franklin Grand Isle Community Action, and these are like relationship building positions that really help with communications between landlords and tenants. And we've seen so many times how just having that extra person to help navigate those relationships makes things so much easier. It gives people more access to information, helps the landlords have a direct line of communication with the tenants, and can really stop problems before they start. And so when these landlord liaisons are strategically placed, they just create these bridges. And it's especially helpful, and this is something we hear from both tenants and also from landlords all the time, that especially the smaller landlords really appreciate having this extra bit of support. And this work, of course, directly complements fair housing education and is foundational to reducing evictions. So what the proposal in the House General Bill is to have 6 landlord liaison positions, 1 at each of the community action agencies and 2 at Capstone. So that's the money part. Now we're going to get into, oh yes, please.
Where was that 600,000 in the House budget?
That's a good question that I don't have the answer to, but I can find out and send it to you. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Thank you.
From the original H772.
Separate from that, yeah. So H772.
It wasn't in H772 originally. I don't think so.
No,
Okay.
it was not.
Great.
It was not. So let's move to H772. So we have really big concerns about this bill. We recognize the very real and very serious community safety challenges that are caused by a small number of egregious situations where there are significant threats to health and safety of neighbors, of housing provider staff, and others. We know that this is a big problem, and you're going to hear some really heartbreaking stories, I'm sure, from our housing provider friends later about these serious conditions. However, this bill, we don't believe is the way to fix that. The bill significantly reduces due process protections for all of Vermont tenants, 70,000 renters. And also these changes would really disproportionately harm people with disabilities, people with limited English proficiency, and those already subject to discrimination or harassment. Shortening these eviction notice and response times will make it harder for tenants to access support, to get help from us in a timely manner, to get legal representation or even emergency rental assistance. The bill also makes multiple changes to landlord-tenant law that we believe weaken existing renter protections. Some provisions we know were intended to strike a balance, but overall, we feel the bulk of this bill is really harmful. So if the issue is the length of time that eviction takes to move through the courts, then address court capacity, increase that court capacity, or maybe establish a housing court, some other way to get these types of issues moved further quicker in an expedient way, rather than erode due process for all renters. CVOEO would support a separate approach if we could pull out something from H772 that would allow for expedited resolution in these truly dangerous situations, if they're paired with tenant protections, right to counsel, and funding for legal services to make that possible. And any expedited process for landlords should be matched by expedited process for tenants, especially in cases involving habitability or landlord non-compliance. We also have really serious concerns about a lot of the other provisions in the bill. I'll mention just a couple now. I'm guessing that Jean will mention more of them in just a few minutes. We have concerns about provisions that would codify landlord fees, such as background check and credit check fees, despite existing statutory limits on application fees. These are the cost of doing business and shouldn't be charged as add-on fees, especially in this constrained market where renters might have to apply for dozens of apartments just to find a home. Other provisions such as posting notices on the door as actual and listing that as part of actual notice, or including an undefined other reason for expedited evictions, are also really problematic. We feel that the current statute has maintained a good balance between landlord and tenant rights and responsibilities, and the 772 disrupts that balance. So those are some of our concerns with 772. I just wanted to end just to talk a little bit more about why fair housing education and early intervention matter. Like we know that these rental relationships are more successful when both landlords and tenants understand their rights and responsibilities, when renters have access to financial and housing education, and when neutral supports like landlord liaisons can help address issues early. These are investments. They're investments that can actually help with the current housing crisis. They can prevent evictions, reduce homelessness, strengthen landlord participation, and save the state money over time. We spend so much time here in Vermont putting band-aids on problems and addressing crises as they come up, but investing in some of these foundational supports for both landlords and tenants can help stop these crises before they start. Regardless of the outcome of H772, we really strongly believe and know that fair housing education and landlord liaison services are essential. And if 772 does pass, which we hope it doesn't, if these significant law changes move forward, and if they become effective July 1st, that's just not enough time to educate renters and landlords and the courts and service providers statewide, and it makes the need for education even stronger. In closing, we respectfully urge you all to restore the $200,000 in fair housing education support funding, fund the $600,000 landlord liaison initiative that's in part of the House General Bill, and overall protect due process for all renters while finding creative solutions to address these really serious and real safety concerns. And we hope you'll invest in solutions that strengthen housing security and stability, landlord participation, and community trust. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and we look forward to collaborating in any way possible. And I welcome your questions.
Great. Thank you, Jess. Really appreciate, and we have your testimony here. Just in terms of time, unless anyone has a pressing question for Jess, I'm going to just keep us moving, and then maybe we can have time for hopefully questions at the end. But anybody have a pressing question for Jess at the moment? Okay, it's been for the whole group. Yeah, for the whole group. Jean, would you be kind enough to join us? Yes, thanks so much. Really appreciate your work generally. It's terrific. Thank you. Jean, welcome. Hi. It's a black and white day. Look at even Brenda's.
It's like, I was looking back at my testimony that I've given to this committee last year and now today. So I think that would be worthwhile to look at what I've been saying.
And we actually have your testimony today, kindly provided by you.
So for the record, my name is Jean Murray. I'm an attorney at Vermont Legal Aid. I've been at Vermont Legal Aid for 28 years, 2 days ago. 28 years.
Congratulations.
And before that, I also practiced housing law in Massachusetts. One of the reasons I want to talk about who I am is because when it pertains to H772 is I'm a practitioner. I go to court. I know how court works. I'm actually on the Supreme Court's Civil Rules Committee. And so not only that, I looked at my own personal numbers, and in the last 3 years, I have talked to, me personally, have talked to 350 tenants and giving them advice about how they, what their options are in preserving their rented housing. So when I talk about where we are in Vermont with landlord tenant law, landlord tenant relations, court process, I hope that this committee would regard me as an expert. Because these things have come up in the State House lately, I've also done a lot of research and data gathering on issues that should affect Vermont's housing policy. So one of the things I want to make clear to people is that 30% of Vermonters are renters. 30% of Vermont households are renters. Half of renters in Vermont pay more than 30% of their income for rent fully. 25% are paying more than 50% of their income for rent.
Can I just add something that's important to me, which is we have one of the largest homeownership disparities between people of color and white people in the country. So when we say 30% of folks are renters, it's more like 75% of Black residents, and it gets, it's just way worse for people of color.
And I wish I could recite all the homeownership statistics as much as I can the renter. I can't.
Yeah. But you almost have to see it's the opposite, right?
Yeah.
We have this huge homeownership gap, which means our renters are largely brown and Black. And Jean, if I ever don't treat you like the expert that you are, it's because I still look for Wendy Morgan like every day of my life.
You work hand in glove.
So I know I'm just like, I'm like, who is it if it's not Wendy? And
Now Andrea, who's right there, also Black and White Day, and we also welcome.
I just can't stop looking for Wendy Morgan.
Yeah.
Please wish her well.
Friends. She worked with us on this, and
Anyway, so median rents in Vermont have increased 40% in the last 5 years. Vacancy rates have been very low for a long time. They're about at 2.1%. Before the pandemic, they were at 4.5%, which is actually an okay vacancy rate if you're trying to find new housing. But at 2.1% and even lower in Chittenden County.
and lower in the Upper Valley, quite frankly. We're
Yeah.
lower than
It is impossible to find housing.
we're less than 1%.
Vermont's rate of people experiencing homelessness is the fourth highest in the nation and continues to increase. The numbers of people who are homeless in Vermont continue to increase. I don't know if we are sliding up the scale or not. And the number of evictions filed in court has increased 9% since 2019. And there's an unknown number of tenancy terminations that have caused Vermont tenants to move out in order to avoid being taken to court. But if there's any indication of how many people are getting termination notices, we could look at how many people call Vermont Legal Aid. And I don't know if you've ever heard from Sam Abel Palmer from Legal Services Vermont, but it is in the tens of thousands a year of people are saying, I've gotten a termination notice. I've had this problem. I need to figure out what my options are.
And so we heard that CVOEO gets 3,000. You get tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. I mean, I think the number is actually 60,000, but that also includes people calling about foreclosure and other housing issues. So, so Vermont is in a housing crisis, and the crisis is in availability, affordability, and instability. It affects Vermont's economy because rents have increased, but Vermont incomes have not increased. Vermont needs workers and consumers, but they can't afford to live here. They can't afford to move here. So then we have a bill that assumedly addresses landlord-tenant issue. It doesn't address this crisis at all. There is, oh my gosh, oh, go away. There's no evidence of any kind to explain why evicting tenants faster is going to address anything about Vermont's housing crisis. So Vermont Legal Aid, I'm going to say that up front, just said it at the end. We oppose this bill. This is going to increase homelessness this is going to make it much harder for tenants to have secure and stable homes. One person who came to House General, and I heard her testimony, was Kaya Morris. And she told the committee not about how she thinks about things generally, but what had happened to her, where she was compelled by no cause eviction to move 3 times in 5 or 6 years because of landlord's ability to give no cause eviction.
I mean, I just want to underscore your point from a completely different angle, which is that having a little bit more time often allows a legal service provider to say, if you have an eviction on your record, it will be very hard for you to find another place to rent, and work on a more expedient and satisfactory solution for everyone, because someone can explain to them, that while you might enjoy having 3 months in this place while the court process is taking place, if it results in an eviction at the end, it is much more likely to result in homelessness. And
yeah, one of the things about time and attorneys is if you have enough time to get to an attorney and the attorney can look at your situation, the attorney can give you options. Tenants should have options. It doesn't mean that eviction should never happen. It just means that there are ways to solve landlord-tenant problems that are not fast eviction. One of the things we've been asking for, I was here in 2023 asking for not only that rent program, which Vermont State Housing Authority has, and it started in this bill, and it is currently in the budget, Vermont State Housing Authority back rent program. But
we love that.
Yeah, I like the availability of funds to pay rent so people can stay in their housing. So back rent is a really important thing to address the housing crisis. And we also asked for eviction diversion, which the judiciary at the time couldn't, they were down-staffed and they needed to restaff.
Yeah.
They couldn't put eviction diversion in the judiciary, but that's one of the things that would really take the time, Senator, that you're talking about, to give people options so that housing is not so destabilized. H772 doesn't do any of this. It doesn't balance any sort of benefits to landlords and tenants. One of the things that this bill has made me do is made me review what the balance in our current law is. Our current law is already tipped in favor of landlords' interests. And then we know that in the past 5 years, market forces have tipped the balance in favor of landlords. And so then the H772 comes along and does a lot of things. It gives landlords a lot of things, or it says it's going to give landlords a lot of things, like the ability to charge fees at the time of application, the continued ability to raise rent by any amount, the continued ability to evict for no cause at the expiration of a lease term of time. It gives an expedited eviction process that doesn't require testimonial evidence in court. In other words, the legitimate goal of our nonprofit housing community partners to ask for help to deal with the incidence of the opioid epidemic that have fallen on like people where drugs are sold is at home, and the nonprofit housing providers, their mission that they work on very hard is to house the hard to house, and they have gotten more problems than they can deal with, and they need to have those problems solved. This bill doesn't do that, but it's stab at doing that. This expedited hearing process, which is, as a practical matter, as a practitioner, completely unfair to tenants. It's not going to solve the problem that they want to solve.
Thank you. So I want to preface my question by saying I am seeing the concerns of this bill and I share many of the concerns. My question, and it's sort of building on the previous testimony and to yours here. I am interpreting the intent as for tenants that fail to meet certain circumstances, meaning non-payment of rent, breach of rental agreement. I'm looking at this chart that this bill is attempting to shorten the amount of time it takes to eject them from the property. And it's trying to, I'm not saying it does, trying to balance that by for tenants where they're not breaking any conditions or so on to give them longer periods of time. Do you see any merit in the second half of this where it's extending the 90 days for when a property is sold? And also from your expertise and experience with this, is this more common? Is this when tenants are being asked to leave and the times when it's being sold or repurposed or that there's a termination of the rental agreement? Is there any good or merit that you're seeing from your perspective in the white paint part of this chart?
So I was on the landlord tenant study committee, and one of the things that tenant advocates brought to the landlord tenant study committee was this idea of just cause eviction, which is right now the law allows eviction for no cause at all. And 90 days has been the standard. 90 days is in our current law. 90 days for tenants who have lived in their places for over 2 years and don't have a written lease. There are lots and lots of tenants that do not have a written lease. I'm a tenant who does not have a written lease. I have lived in my apartment for 21 years. I get 90 days notice. Because of course I'm not going to be evicted for anything I did. Anyway, so the idea that this bill suddenly gives people 90 days notice. No, people have had 90 days notice for no cause for a long time. And the tenant advocate said it's time to not have any no cause notice at all, but rather if it's the landlord that needs to change something, like if you put a family member in the unit or to renovate or to sell, and the landlord needs to do something, have them state their reason of what they want to do. So do I see any merit in that? No, I see sort of a diversionary tactic by saying, hey, we're giving you 90 days. And I'm like, we have 90 days. So this isn't giving us anything new. And you are continuing to allow no cause eviction, which is not what the people told the landlord in the study.
Right, but more limited, in all fairness, more limited, and for cause is more fully articulated in this bill. Not just cause, but for cause, and reducing no cause. I would really like people to read the actual bill because it put in all this just cause language, but it also retained the sections that says no cause. Both no cause with a not a written lease and at the expiration of the lease time. But by the way, our nonprofit housing provider friends, they cannot evict for no cause. And so do I see landlords using no cause? That's a really big problem, actually, from my point of view, with H772. H772 said, let's have two procedures. One procedure for people who are going to be evicted for non-payment of rent and they had bad behavior. By the way, the bad behavior evictions are actually the smallest number of evictions statistically. It's like maybe 70%. And often the behavior that people have missed, the lease violation that they did, was not being able to keep up with paperwork. So anyway, so as Jessica was saying, the real but very small number of people who need to be evicted because of their bad behavior. So non-payment and bad behavior would go in one process, and no cause would go in another process, which is totally not cognizant of the fact. It was one of my first cases when I got to Vermont. Somebody sent a termination notice that said, here's your termination for non-payment of rent, which is this day. But if you pay, you won't be terminated for non-payment of rent. And then later down the page it said, but you will be terminated in 90 days for no cause. That's been part of the landscape for the entire time I've been in Vermont. And before that, landlords send two notices. Okay, under 772, where does that go? Which does it go to the faster process in the brand new subchapter 4 to Title 12? Title 12? Or does it go in the current process?
So from a practitioner point of view, this bill is incredibly flawed, is going to inject a lot of chaos into landlord tenant law on the no evidence that the courts have been inefficient. Yes, the pandemic threw everything, creating remote hearings and online filing. There was a huge thing that's happened in the last 5 years with all of that. The pandemic and online filing and remote hearings and the court being down-staffed, especially for judges. But ask them, they've caught up. There aren't inefficiencies in the court. Perry Corsones, the chief administrative judge, came in and told the committee that most evictions were already being disposed of within 190 days. And we know from the data that 76% of evictions are disposed within 180 days, which is the aspirational goal for the judiciary for civil process. So why are we doing this? Why are we injecting chaos? Why are we saying that it has to be effective July 1st? Like Jessica pointed out, how in the world are people going to retool? This takes away any predictability that we had about how things are supposed to work. It doesn't give anything to tenants that no real thing. It allows them to be charged fees at the time of application, which is a huge barrier to finding housing. It sets the standard for security deposits at 2 months. So now, and it also says 2 months and first month's rent. I don't think the words first month's rent should be in the security deposit statute.
Exactly.
But
I want to like.
It basically says anybody who wants an apartment has to come up with 3 months rent. There aren't, I'm somewhat familiar with the HUD programs, the rapid rehousing programs, and the cash that HUD gives our agencies to help tenants, and they have limits to them. I'm not sure that they would be able to come up with 3 months rent to get a tenant in, or allowed. Maybe we should call Jessica back because she probably know better. But so it's not going to work to achieve the purpose that the people who were asking for it. You know, one of the things.
So we just need to keep moving because we have a little bit next.
Landlord-tenant relationships are relationships.
Yes.
They are complicated. If we thought that there is a production line that you put in a little of this and you put in a little of that and you're going to get that result, that is never the way a landlord-tenant relationship works. The nature of the disputes for each person involved are unique, and the expectations of these parties are different. Vermont needs human services programs, including attorneys, mediators, evidence-based landlord liaison programs, navigators, and other workers who solve problems so that housing isn't destabilized. H772 does nothing about that. It doesn't do anything to incentivize landlords to rent more. If people were actually talking about landlord incentives, maybe we'd be talking about tax policy. Mm-hmm. Maybe we would be talking about programs to help landlords rent to lower income people. None of that is in H772. Right. There are so many harmful things in it. It's not a good bill. I really want you not to pass it.
Thank you, Jean. We have Jean's testimony. And we have appreciated. And I would just also remind us that we have the landlord tenant task force report on our website. It identified problems we need to resolve. This is not a perfect system. I would remind us, or we wouldn't have begun work on this bill. So you help identify a lot of the problems that the task force wasn't able to make recommendations. They didn't have the time to take the problems and then make recommendations. And so this work, as you know, was an attempt to try and resolve some of the issues raised in the landlord tenant task force. So
I'm not sure I agree.
Yeah, well,
no, and they
allowed to disagree.
I mean, a lot of the landlord tenant task force, whether or not I agreed with the landlord tenant task force report, a lot of it did point to the kinds of solutions that Jean just mentioned. I almost forgot what I was going to ask. But the first the thing that you're an attorney, right? And you've been doing landlord tenant law for so long. And I had this back and forth with Senator Sears 2 years ago, because I think the reason there is much of this that is not necessarily our jurisdiction is because, and whether or not Senator Sears and I agreed 2 years ago, this notion that we're just saying, we just need to get the drug dealers out quickly is absolutely a judicial matter of who we mean, what we mean. For our purposes as a housing committee, I want us to remember that drug dealers can live in really nice housing also. If we feel we have drug problems in the state and people who are taking advantage of homeowners or landlords or tenants to put them under duress and use their property for illegal activities, we need to deal with that in a better way, first and foremost through the courts and the judicial process.
Okay.
The idea that we're just saying we have to get drug dealers out is very problematic for landlord and tenant law.
Agreed. I will remind us that we had a joint hearing with Judiciary in the Senate chamber on Decker Towers and this part of this challenge. But right now, given our time and Friday and appropriations needs, I'm going to thank Jean. This is great. This conversation is just beginning in this committee. So we're off to a good start. Thank you for your input. And Elizabeth, we're going to bring up Elizabeth Bridgewater.
I put my email on my written testimony, so if
And we already have it. It's
questions,
already up on our website.
you can email me questions and I'll be very happy to answer them.
And we'll have you back too. And you're not far away. And we have all Kara has provided everybody's testimony this morning for us at our places. So thank you for
We never see you in person.
I know, it's nice to
great
be
to
here.
have you in person. Welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you for coming all the way up from Windham County.
Yeah, this is an important topic. Thank you for inviting me to provide comments and insights on H772. My name is Elizabeth Bridgewater. I'm the executive director of the Windham and Windsor Housing Trust. We are a 38-year-old nonprofit located in Brattleboro, but we serve both Windham and Windsor counties with housing programs that provide rental homes to over 900 households, shared equity homes to over 150 homeowners, and home repair services to both single-family, owner-occupied households, and also privately owned properties through the VHIP program. We also have an internal team of supportive services staff through the Staff for All program that help residents with eviction prevention and health and well-being support. I'm here today because I too care about tenant stability, especially for vulnerable tenants that we provide housing to. I have a responsibility in my role to provide safe and decent housing to low and moderate individuals and families. I also have a responsibility to provide a safe working environment for my staff. And I have a responsibility to protect the sustainability of our affordable housing communities so that they're available for future generations, which is the vision of state investments in perpetually affordable homes. Unfortunately, it's getting harder and harder to fulfill those responsibilities because of some of the challenging dynamics that have emerged over the last 5 to 6 years. And while I respect my colleagues' experience as a practitioner receiving eviction notices, from my experience as a practitioner working directly in communities and with renters that we house, I don't feel like the legal tools that we have right now are effective in addressing some of the challenges that have emerged in Vermont in the last 5 to 6 years. These trends began coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, the virus impacted people that contracted it, but it also had other impacts beyond the health of physical health, and that's isolation, loneliness. For a lot of vulnerable people who had struggled with substance use, they went back to some of those behaviors. And this was right around the time that fentanyl hit the drug supply. So we had an opioid, we had a pandemic of the virus, the COVID-19 virus, paired with the introduction of a very highly addictive drug, about 50 times higher, more addictive than heroin, and it has a shorter cycle on the body. So if you have people that are really struggling with substance use that need to access this drug
more often in order to basically avoid feeling like they're going to die with the withdrawal symptoms. This dynamic created a very compelling business opportunity, right? For people that have no problem a predatory business opportunity, basically profiting off of other people's misery. And as Jean said, these activities don't happen in public, they happen in homes, and they're happening in some of the homes that we provide in our community. What these predatory drug dealers do is they identify a vulnerable person. It's often somebody that is very low income. They may have a disability. We see this a lot when these situations occur, or somebody that has low capacity to advocate for themselves, to stand up for themselves. In these cases, these homes are being completely taken over by often people that are out of state that are coming up to do business in Vermont. That target person's home, they don't have any control over their living environment anymore. We've seen situations where a formerly homeless tenant who was in a stable home was sleeping in the backyard in a sleeping bag because they couldn't even access their home anymore. In other situations.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Did you help them get a relief from abuse or exploitation order?
We help them, get those folks out of their unit.
Right.
Not through that system.
Okay. Because, that's like I've seen a lot of victims of violence. Relief. I strengthen the relief from exploitation order because it doesn't always have to be an intimate partner.
Right.
That is the quickest way to get someone out of property they may even be on a lease of or may own. Do you use the relief from abuse or exploitation orders to help people? Do you point them to victim advocate?
So in this case, as the landlord, we tend to either try to work with a tenant to ask for help. We work closely with our police department to make sure the tenant knows that they will be protected.
They could get within 24 hours in order to have someone out.
Often the tenant is so intimidated that they can't interact with us and they won't interact with us. And that's often the barrier. And I'm going to talk about why I think the no trespass law will actually address that, because what we see are people that are so intimidated. I mean, we had one tenant that we worked with for months who refused to really work with us, and we kept offering help. And then finally she felt a moment of grace and came down and asked for help. She was actually in the building where our office was. And we called the police department right there, and she left the building with a blanket over her head. That's how frightened she was. And just being seen with the collaborating with the news. So people are really, really frightened in these situations. And often they can't say yes. They can't say, yes, I need help.
Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to get back to where my comments were. So I described that I think the other impact of this is on the other tenants that live in the building. So when somebody is taking over a unit in somebody's home, they are basically setting up shop to sell drugs. So they've got a lot of customers coming and going. That happens all throughout the night. It's happening at all hours of the day. There's lots of noise, lots of intimidating behavior. If people can't get in the building, there's property damage. We have one building in downtown Brattleboro where the front doors were pried open with crowbars probably 10 different times. And we're trying to replace the doors over and over again. It's very expensive. There's a lot of damage to the common spaces and people are terrified. So what are our options? And I appreciate you bringing that option up. I feel like we have very, very limited options because people are so scared. And so we either have to, our tool that's the most effective right now is actually evicting the tenant. And in most cases, the tenant's actually the one that's being taken advantage of. But because they are so terrified and can't ask for help, we can't use some of the other tools at our disposal. So this is why I feel like the no trespass provision in H772 is a really great tool for us. I'll share a story of what happened last week at one of our properties. We knew a tenant was in this situation. We brought the Brattleboro Police Department into the unit. They have embedded social workers right in the police department. They brought 2 of them with them. And the tenants seemed really hesitant. They were really trying to offer help, support, and they couldn't get a clear answer for what was going on. The sergeant left and left the two social workers in the unit, and the drug dealers were hiding behind the couch the whole time. And they stood up and were fairly intimidating, and the social workers left. If we had had the ability to get a no trespass in that moment, we could have gone right back to that sergeant and said, hey, we want to expel these people from the whole building. And right now, the current law doesn't allow us to do that. Right now, the current law needs to have everybody that lives in that building sign a no trespass order, including the tenant who's being intimidated and victimized. And so they don't, they're too scared to do that. So we would like some levers that we can pull in order to deal with it very quickly and also protect the tenant who's being victimized. In other cases, and this is actually less common.
Can I ask you a question on the trespass?
Yes.
So I'm reading the trespass passage and I'm not seeing that affecting any of the eviction timelines. Am I not interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, they're separate provisions. Yeah.
So that's a part of the bill that's not related to this. That seems reasonable.
Yeah, it's an update to the current law, which the tenant themselves has the ability to get a no trespass on their home themselves. They can do that. If we want to, as a property owner, bar somebody from the building because they're intimidating the tenant, intimidating our staff, which has happened. We've had our staff surrounded by bad actors in the hallways and pretty frightening situations. We have a protocol now where we send 2 staff members in, which is highly, not very cost effective or efficient to have 2 staff members go at any given time to certain locations. So it's really drawing on our resources in a way that I don't think was ever envisioned.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
We just need to keep ourselves moving. Yeah.
Well, and so much of what we have been talking about is judiciary's jurisdiction, but this specifically, I'm writing to Nada right now because I feel like there's a bigger question for the landlord-tenant relationship about something I introduced a decade ago, which still does not exist in law, that it is a legal requirement that a tenant notify their landlord of a subletter, let's say, or somebody living on their premises for a certain period of time that makes them otherwise a tenant. That doesn't exist right now. I believe it's just a breach of contract because most contracts, right? Some landlords may not if you don't have a written contract, but some landlords probably have in their written contract, you can't just have someone live here without notifying me, et cetera, et cetera. That seems like an important precursor, is having it be a legal requirement to notify that you have another person living in your house long term, or however we want to define it, before they can be considered an unlawful occupant for the purpose of a no trespass.
I'm not sure I understand. The question.
Like, are in the situations you're dealing with, they probably never, the tenant has never told you, by the way, I have this person living with me, because I don't think it's really legal.
Right.
So how do you all currently, you all currently have the ability to say this person is not on the lease, they cannot be here. You're saying that ability is stymied right now to get a no trespass because law enforcement will require that every tenant sign on to this. They're not recognizing that you've already determined this is an unlawful occupant.
Yes, that is exactly true. So especially in affordable housing cases, we do have embedded regulations because of the funding sources that we use.
Right, I worked at a shelter.
Right,
Yeah.
people need to notify us. So
right.
It may not be in current Vermont law, but it does apply to us. And so a tenant has to let us know because there's income requirements and household income requirements.
Right.
And so it's a whole thing that we're monitoring all the time around who's living in the unit. But the remedy for that is the court system. If a tenant refuses to comply, we're still back to the court system.
Okay, but before there's like a problem, like there were drug dealers with guns and you know, they're making a disturbance in the hallway or something, you do have the authority if you know someone is living there that's not a lawful occupant, because you are not legally allowed to be here. You don't necessarily have to involve the tenant in the decision to remove that person.
I don't believe we have that legal right to do that other than an eviction order. We don't have the legal right to put a no trespass on like an unauthorized tenant that's living in the apartment. The way I understand it.
So we'll get to this as we discuss those sections, and I think I just looked at, given we have two more people to hear from, I'd love to
absolutely
have you finish if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to, so that whole area of focus is on the no trespass situation. It's really designed to deal with guests, and not just the guests that's taken over the unit, but also the guests that are coming in the middle of the night and trying to, partake in this business and are intimidating people and threatening people. And there's a lot of desperate behavior that goes along with that. And so there's a lot of challenging behavior that we're seeing. So that's what that's designed to address. The other of the carve out around a faster eviction timeline is designed to address the tenant themselves. And while it's less often, we do see sometimes tenants are the locus of the problem. And we had a situation that happened in one of our units where a tenant didn't have anything on their record. We rented to them, and within a few weeks they invited their boyfriend to come and live with them, and they set up shop. So she was one of the issues. She wasn't being taken advantage of. She was the one that was running the business. It took us over a year to evict her. And during that time, this is one of the really egregious cases where, common space got taken over. People's doors were being knocked on in the middle of the night. They set up shop in the outside. They took over the driveway. There was just a ton of activity going on all at once. There were 2 arrests by the police department. The tenants in the building watched them take guns out of the units. And those tenants were back the next day running their business because we were in the court system and we couldn't speed it up any faster. So there was a lot of trauma that happened for everybody living in that neighborhood, in that building during this time period. And
can we talk more about what were the details of what took so long in court, right? This just says you get a hearing within a certain number of days. That is a problem we probably need to solve through greater resources to the judiciary where there are hotspots, as we heard, for this issue. But barring getting a hearing in the first 21 days, what else took so long in that process?
I don't know whether it was the court system just taking its toll. I know at first we went for a strategy of non-payment because that tends to go faster, and it's got very objective criteria that's easier for a judge to review and verify. And so that was our initial strategy while we were gathering, evidence on all this other stuff, much harder. And that's the other thing. There's months that go into building that kind of case before you can get to the court system. So
did you feel like you got help from our legal system to like your local police, et cetera, to stay in touch about how you build that case? And
Absolutely. Yeah. Brattleboro Police Department is really progressive. And the fact that they did 2 police raids on this apartment, they gave us that objective criteria that was visible and documented. And so this was a case that we were able to make it to the end, right? But the end just took over a year to get there.
And traumatized a bunch of people on the way.
I guess what we have to balance, at least judiciary does, and we have to balance, is if they're ejected from the apartment, that doesn't mean the problem goes away. Correct. Right. So then maybe it moves to another street in the community or another community. I remember the police chief in Hardwick saying, this is like cracking a walnut shell. If you don't do it right, the pieces just fly into the smaller communities that have less oversight and support. So we as lawmakers still have to think about what happens if you eject those folks before an investigation occurs and some criminal penalty is applied. if they're just still in the community.
I agree that there is a bigger picture strategy that needs to be employed. But I need to be able to
But you
say
need
to
to
my
be-
tenants, I want you to have a safe environment and I'm doing everything I can where you live right now to address this. And that is the biggest conversation we're having with tenants when, when things go sideways. And so I want them to know that I'm doing everything I can to create a safe environment for them.
So
This
Elizabeth,
is-
I'd love to have you finish, don't rush, just finish as you can.
Those are the focus of my comments around H 772. I also just wanted to address something education wise that Jean said that they see a lot of evictions for paperwork, people struggling catching up with paperwork. And I just want to educate the committee that that's actually a requirement of the tax credit program, that if somebody's not doing their paperwork on time, in order for us to comply with the regulations, we have to submit that notice to them. Right. It doesn't mean that we're actually going to evict them in the time frame. We're always willing to work with somebody to caught up on that paperwork, but we need to have that notice in our file for a whole nother regulatory kind of set of responsibilities. So I just wanted to add that piece because I think that is a common thing, and I just wanted to add that as an educational component.
Right.
So anyway, I really appreciate, this is a really complex issue. There are other strategies and other things at play that need to be put into place, but from our experience, I think these two tools that are in the bill would really help us solve some problems right now.
Thank you very much. And we will probably have you all back because you're all some of our key expert witnesses on this. I think we're going to shift to Angela Zakowski, who I think is online. So, okay. Then if Angela isn't, then I'm going to actually call on Chris until Angela's available. Could you let her know we're ready for her?
Yes,
Because Chris happily is a regular in this building, and we could, if Angela shows up, Chris has kindly said he would go and follow her at another point.
Chris Donnelly, the Champlain Health and Trust. Yes, and if you see her pop up on the screen, just interrupt, and I'm happy to remind her. Happy to come back.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for hearing from folks today on this bill, and I'm sure you'll hear more. I've been following this bill through the whole process. And the reason being is a lot of what Elizabeth just said, that we really we need to support our tenants in a better way with more tools. And just
so Chris, she's not able to come today. So
I'll just keep going
take your
until
testimony, and we'll revoke Angela for maybe Tuesday.
just let you know how we operate and how other nonprofit organizations operate. If you have a lease with us and you're paying your rent, you're entitled to a lease, by lease, you can be tenant for life. We won't kick you out. We have rent stabilization. We want the rent increases each year to a small percent. So we have a lot of the things that are kind of encapsulated in what people think of as just cause eviction.
So just cause eviction. Sorry, we're just trying to figure out when we're going to get Angela back. Just cause eviction just means that at the end of the tenant contract, the lease, they're able to stay forever.
Automatically renewed.
With how is the rent increase enabled in that if there's no lease?
It's regulated. We submit requests to our regulators, the HFA primarily, and it's just it's a 3%, something like that. I think the exact amount, but small amount.
So just cause isn't what
So
we
just-
think of as having like a reason to be evicted. It's a process whereby people can just stay forever.
We just don't engage in no cause eviction. Right. So that's kind of the flip side of the coin. So we always have a reason if we want to pursue a termination of a lease or an eviction process. We've also been asked to house the most vulnerable ones. In the last several years, we've been asked to house more people moving out of homelessness. Those people need protection as well, as Elizabeth mentioned. We have increased our resident services staff so that when there is a bump in the road for people, our first offer is for help. So connection support, whether it's financial resources, or other kind of services in the community from other partners. So we do that. We have 12 resident services staff now that works throughout our portfolio of 2,700 homes. They connect people to services, but also engage with people. For example, I saw a notice that was one of those going out to a tenant last week. Their kids were hanging out on the roof. They said, "Don't do that. That's a use violation." But we're going to have our resident services sweep this stuff out. It's not a reason for us to terminate. We will always offer help. So our priority is to protect our tenants, to protect our staff, and to protect our properties. And I think protecting our tenants, our staff with 1A and 1B, protecting our properties is 2. Priorities really people. We keep them safe. Right now in our portfolio, we have a dozen to 15 properties that we will not enter. We will not let staff enter.
You have, I don't know, how many properties do you manage at the
About
moment of rent?
2,500. So there's a
2,500 properties.
Apartments.
And
So
so
there are-
25, there's some you're basically are too dangerous to enter.
We will not enter. We
How
will
many?
not, 12 to 15.
Jeez.
Small number, but really, these are the ones that you can't, and those are scattered to the portfolio. So those are.
Are those units or?
Those are
buildings?
units. And so those are impacting all the other tenants in the building. We have, it's hard to retain our staff because of these conditions. There's another 60 or 70 that have kind of a red flag or orange flag on them. So you need to go in with at least a couple people when you go in. You need to make sure that you're safe. So in the last year, we've increased our spending on security. We have sheriffs, contracted the sheriff walking the halls of some buildings at night. We have one of those portable blue light flashing things that we're able to put in different properties. To just, it has camera on it that allows for more eyes or at least video on sites. We have hired a director of security. It's a full-time staff person that just deals with security issues in our portfolio.
So
Patient.
I think those are good ideas anyway, right? Like that's been recommended to BHA. And BHA's concern was they didn't want to do any rent increases to pay for security to protect the tenants, right? So, I mean, security is important for your tenants. It doesn't necessarily solve the problem to eject people. They could go right outside. They could still harass your tenants. So I'm sure you're seeing, I mean, they could be playing loud music. You know, that's what we deal with in Burlington a lot is infractions of the law are not necessarily pointing a gun at somebody. There are a lot of things that disturb the peace that probably do require security when you have that many tenants.
So the issue with Burlington Housing Authority was they could not increase the rent in order to pay for these extra things. They actually had to find website resources. What I'm saying is that
It's not that they cannot, it takes more.
It wouldn't be enough to do what they needed.
Well, sure, and we wanted to try to support them with that, but the tenants were asking for the security
Yes.
too, and security is kind of important nowadays. I mean, condo buildings have security, so you know, that isn't necessarily going to be solved. Like you don't all of a sudden not need security if people are ejected from your buildings.
Some of the most egregious things are really threatening the health and safety and welfare of everybody else in the building. And if we didn't have security, then people would not feel safe in their homes. And our property managers, I agree with you, but our property managers will say that a tenant will tell them, at least you get to go home at night. And we have to go home to this happening next to us. And so that kind of security, yes, it's necessary. But this is $500,000 that we spent last year that we didn't spend 5 years ago. Right. And that's money that we're not spending on other things to support tenants or do other work. We have increased amount of rental arrears because of the time that it takes to go through the eviction process when it's payments. If it's 6, 7, the number was quoted earlier, 76% of the evictions meet the aspirational goal of 180 days. That means 24% are not meeting the aspirational goal of 180 days. That's 6 months of non-payment of rent. Last year, we wrote off $900,000 worth of rent. Currently, we have $550,000 back rent that we will eventually have. Those are resources that we are not able to use for other purposes. The time for eviction, as I touched on that, was brought up earlier in the example of Kai Morris's testimony upstairs. She had a no cause eviction 3 times within 5 years. When the House General heard that testimony, that's when they decided to move to a 90-day time period across the board. 90 days only, determination of lease that only is for people right now that have lived in a place for 2 years or more. Anyone that's less than that, or anyone with a written rental agreement, is actually a shorter time period right now than 90 days. So this bill actually extends that time period from 90 days. And I think what she testified upstairs, which is a critical piece, if the bill actually allows for more money in your hand, because you can ask for party security deposit back early. And so cash and more time is really what's, if we're not going to get to a full getting rid of no cause eviction in a bill, which we would support that. I just don't see it passing this body. We're not going to get to that. At least we can give people more time, more action.
There's a question.
Yeah, Grant.
Do you feel that your policies or requirements for policies to screen tenants in different ways or in a more intrusive way is a factor in the evictions that you do have to do or want to do? And we have sufficient information about the tenant, if you will, to know that this tenant is a high risk for being in the category that would cause eviction.
I wouldn't say screening is always the best tool. What we have oftentimes when we are tasked with asking, we're being asked to house people coming out of homelessness. Whenever we have a vacancy, 35% of those people moving into those apartments have been homeless. And so what we ask for is a service plan from a service provider that says, this is what we're going to give that person to help them succeed. That if that service plan isn't robust enough, or if it's just checking boxes, then we ask them to do it again. And so we try to manage who's coming in on the inside. But as Elizabeth mentioned before, sometimes it's outside influences later on too. So
just on service supported housing for your residents, how has that increased? You talk about the security increasing. How have you embedded more? You've increased service supported housing for the last several years, and that's also quite expensive, but so helpful.
Prior to the pandemic, we had 2 resident services people, social work staff on staff, and we had 12 now. 12.
Senator Brock's question, that's where my mind keeps circling, is I wonder how many of these problems might be better addressed through more rigorous screening processes. But once a landlord engages with a tenant, there is a relationship there, and there is due process, and it is a sensitive thing to eject somebody from a place where they have a right to live based on a contract. So I'm curious if there's more things we could do to give you the tools you need to be more thorough in your pre-screening, so that you don't end up with a tenant that cause you these problems. Those that are more deserving and ready to live in the environment are the ones that are getting the housing first.
I hear you. Well, with respect, I bristle a little bit at deserving, word deserving, but point taken. We are tasked with being a bit of a housing of last resort, just like insurance. Company.
This is our partner on rehousing.
And you fund us, and you ask us to do this work.
Yes.
And this is what we do, and we are most, 95, whatever percent of the tenants fine, and easy, pay the rent, great. It's just a small number. I'm not saying it's 5%, but just a small number that are really causing havoc for all of the other people. And those are the people that will really, keep us up at night, but we need to protect their safety. I hear you. We also are tasked with doing, in the last several years, doing more.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's when we are grateful because part of our exiting homelessness strategy has been our affordable housing partners. That partnership with us has enabled this.
94 people moved out of homelessness into one of our apartments.
Incredible.
91
Last year.
And Elizabeth, the same for you. You had quite a number too.
Yeah, out of all the turnovers that we did last year, 46% of them went to people exiting from this. We have a strong commitment.
Sorry, Chris, finish. Oh, sorry, David, you go.
Well, I'm just curious if you're getting to the punchline.
Yes, so we support this bill. I have several things that I think would improve the bill that I'm happy to walk through. But essentially, we do need a faster process. And we need this no trespass in order that expands the ability for us to protect our properties. I've had several conversations over the last few months with tenant advocates. I can hear the concerns. I get it. We operated under a lot of the stuff that they're asking for. I get that, but I also feel like we're in the middle of this. We're in the middle of the road. We're also a large property owner management. In the bill itself, I think in the actual notice sections, you have, on the first page, you have hand delivered or delivered by the sheriff's service. Hand delivered is the same thing as being delivered by the sheriff's service. Having a sheriff, and I heard this from advocates, having a sheriff show up at your door can be intimidating.
Yeah.
Do we need to, inject that kind of situation into the relationship? On Pam's chart, this is the old one, so don't look at what I'm holding up, but you guys have this. It has a distinction between the current statute and the change statute. One of the things that's also on the first page is that it changes the rebuttable presumption that the notice was received. So in the current law, you mail something, you have to set the termination notice 14 days after they've received it. Correct? So that's 17 days, 14 plus 3, that's 17 days. Under the revision, as you mail it, you have to set the time that the presumption of receipt 5 days after you received it. So you can set it 10 days, so it's 10 plus 5. So we're actually talking in this new kind of regime, a reduction of 2 days notice or when something gets mailed. Right? So I just want there are certain things in the bill I just want people to understand that aren't I don't think as much as sky is falling as a lot of testimony has, or at least I've heard personally. I think two other people have mentioned this, charging for a background check and a credit check is just, it's unnecessary. I don't think tenants should be charged for that. I think that's something that property owner has as part of their business. They can decide whether or not to charge for it.
They're usually not.
We don't.
Right.
And we process 2,000 applications a year.
You don't require one, you mean?
We don't charge for it.
Yeah.
So I just think asking a tenant to come up with that money when they're applying for several apartments.
Right. But I guess the rub we always have is we have to balance big landlords and small landlords, that people who know the law and people who don't. And a lot of what you're talking about really seems to be what comes with being a large housing provider. Like UVM has these problems, Anyone who's housing a lot of people in close quarters has programming they need to provide, security they need to provide, systems they need to have in place. I understand that the difference is UVM can charge, frankly, more than the market to live in UVM housing. And you can't do that with a lot of your tenants. That is a great way to advocate that, that's why it costs more per unit for you. That's why you need more money from the state to keep service-rich housing. But I think we do have to make sure that we're not creating landlord-tenant law simply for large housing providers that could hurt a lot of other people. Because you also then are supposed to then have the coordinated resources to handle these situations in different ways than one landlord who might just say, yeah, I'm just gonna say this person's doing illegal things and get them out of here.
And this is why I wholeheartedly support what Jess was talking about before, and that's resources so that we can do that landlord and tenant education so that people understand
Right.
what the law is.
But the rest of this is like not the sky falling, but a huge upending of landlord tenant law for things you're talking about that do come with being large housing providers in a time of despair for people.
I would say that all landlords, no matter what their size, experience some of these.
We're talking about your problems on a larger scale.
No,
I
I
understand.
appreciate, but I would say they're not the only, I mean, I think all landlords are affected by all these issues that.
As our tenant.
Yeah.
And you will hear from other people that smaller landlords may be going out of the business.
Yeah.
I haven't talked to directly, with them, but I've heard that.
We've heard that. And we'll hear from Angela Zakowski, who's the landlord, runs the Landlords Association. She'll be in next week. And we will obviously, continue this conversation. Anything else, Chris, before you finish? And you're here, so we'll.
Yeah, I can always come back and, extending the effective date by 3 months to give people a little time to get used to this.
Yeah, I hear that.
Fine.
Was the effective date of one passage,
No, it's July 1st.
which is upon passage? Oh,
Yeah,
July
effective
1st. So
date.
I'm saying.
I think we would entertain the notion of it being.
Go to September, turn to September 1st. Just
Yeah.
give people some time to, that's typically when a lot of leases are signed.
Right.
There's a handful of other things, but I don't want to.
Right.
Well, you want to talk about budget too, right?
We need to just briefly talk about that, but I hear you on the support for the 200,000 for
$1 million for
tenant landlord education piece, which is so critical.
I
And
think-
CBO does such a good job.
I think legal aid, said several years ago that half the evictions in Vermont can be solved with money. So I think $1 million for back until then, that's
Yes.
in the house budget.
It's in the House budget. That is one of the pluses in H 772. That is one of the pro and pieces of this stuff.
can you remind, who is Vermont financing now? Is it gone?
I don't know what Vermont.
Vermont financing used to be illegal.
No.
Oh, it's just now.
I can answer that. So Vermont Tenants Inc. is the precursor to the statewide Vermont Tenants Program that is housed within CVOEO.
Okay, I was like, my brain is 20 years old on this stuff still, so.
My last.
I guess like $1 million for our program, the Vermont, the VRAP.
No, it's the Vermont State Housing Authority's rental arrears program.
That's right. It's the rental arrears. Yeah, and I think we talked about this yesterday. I think that's a high priority for this.
And then just, I know there's been some discussion about creating a housing court. I'd love to study that.
Yes.
And think about ways to.
I think
implement that.
housing diversion, which Jean talked about, and the housing court discussion, I think are pieces that may be good additions for us as we contemplate.
It would be a judiciary.
Yes, but I think
it
we could.
meet together.
The idea is one I support.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. We're trying to balance this conversation, and if you know people we haven't heard from, we would appreciate. We're clear on the people who want to speak, who we'll have next week. We're going to be dealing with this. It's a major bill that we're going to be working on. So I know you want to speak, Brian. Maybe there are lots of you. So thank you very much. This was a good start. And thank you for coming all the way. And team.
We done?
Question.
Yep.
I just have a question for you because we have to be done in a couple of minutes.
But are we going
Yeah.
fine? Are we?
Just see your care assessment.
I just know.
We could go offline because it's just a scheduling issue. Okay, thanks.